I am 87 years old, and I have watched most of the people I grew up with go on ahead of me. So believe me when I tell you the hardest years of a person's whole life are not the very old ones I am walking through now. They are the 10 years between 65 and 75. I know because I lived every day of them. And last winter, I finally sat down at my own table and counted the reasons they were so hard. There were 7. I wrote each one on the back of an old seed envelope, and when I was done, I did not feel ashamed of them, and I did not feel proud that I had survived them. I felt honest, maybe for the first time in a long while. So sit with me a while, close to the fire, if your own knees have started to ache and your own mirror has started to surprise you. I am not going to tell you those years are hard, because the body finally breaks down. That is the easy answer, and it is not the true one. The body has been quietly leaving us since we were 40. So why does that one decade feel so much heavier than all the ones before it? Because something no doctor measures happens in there. Every last illusion you were still allowed to keep falls away, all at once, in the same short handful of years. Let me show you the very first one. My grandmother lived to be very old, and she crossed rivers on foot her whole life, before there were bridges near us. She used to say the hardest part of any river is never the near bank and never the far bank. The hardest part is the middle, the place where your feet no longer touch the bottom, and your hands cannot yet reach the other side. And do you know what she meant by the middle? On the near bank, you are still who you were. On the far bank, you have become someone new, someone settled. But in the middle, you are neither, and the water does not care how strong you used to be. 65 to 75, she would tell me, is the middle of the river. Nobody drowns because the water is deep. They drown because they keep reaching backward for a bank that is already gone. Hold that image with me, because every one of these 7 confessions is a stone I carried up out of that middle water. So here is the first confession, the first stone. Somewhere in there, the people around you quietly stop asking what you think. It does not happen with an argument. It happens at a kitchen table, on a Sunday, when your son and his wife are deciding something real, a move, a job, a school for the grandchildren. And you realize the deciding is already finished. They are only telling you now, kindly, the way you tell a child it is going to rain. I remember the exact day it happened to me. I had run a crew of 11 men for 30 years. Men waited on my word before they lifted a hand. And there I sat at 68, offering my opinion about the new truck, and watching my own boy nod at me the way you nod at someone you love but no longer need to hear. My grandfather said a man is not old when his hair goes white. He is old the first morning his voice becomes furniture in his own house. And what did I do about it? For a while, I just got louder. That was the wrong fix, and it cost me. The right one took me years to find, and I promise I will get to it. Before I give you the second stone, let me set something down beside you gently. So many of you have written to me, asking how a person even begins to face a decade like this one. Where to start when the ground itself is moving. So I gathered what my grandmother taught me, and what these hard years taught me, into a small book. I call it The Native Way. It is only the same things I am telling you now, laid out quietly so you can go at your own pace, alone at your own table, on the nights that are hardest. If your heart wants it, I will point you to where it waits before we say good night. And if it does not, that is just as well. No pressure at all. I am here with you either way, whether you ever open it or not. There, it is set down. Now come back close to the fire, because the second confession is a harder one than the first, and I do not want you to hear it alone. Here is the second confession. In that decade, you are still sharp enough to measure, down to the inch, everything you have lost. That is the true cruelty of it. Later on, a mercy comes. The memory softens, the edges blur, and you are spared some of it. But at 65, at 70, your mind is a clean mirror. You remember exactly how far you could once walk. You remember the name of every man you buried, and the sound of your wife's voice before the illness thinned it. You are young enough to still want all of it back, and old enough to know it is not coming. I would stand at the top of my own stairs some mornings and remember carrying 2 grandchildren up them at once, one on each arm, and I could still feel the exact weight of them, and the stairs would blur in front of me. My grandmother said the young forget their grief because they are busy, and the very old forget it because God is kind, but the ones in the middle carry it wide awake. Do you know that feeling? Remembering something so clearly that it hurts worse than the losing ever did? That is the second stone, and there is no fix for it, but one. Stop calling it a punishment. It is only love with nowhere left to go. Here is the third confession, and it is the one that changes everything. In this decade, for the first time, the empty chairs are not strangers' chairs. They are your own people. Up to 60, you go to funerals for the generation above you. That is the natural order, and a heart can bear it. Then somewhere past 65, the order breaks. Now it is the man who stood up beside you at your wedding. Now it is the woman you called every Sunday for 50 years. Now, for some of you, it is the person who slept beside you. The phone calls you used to dread become the phone calls you no longer get, because the one who would have made them is gone. I lost my closest friend, Raymond, the same autumn I turned 71. We had fished the same bend of the river since we were boys with bare feet. The spring after, I walked down to that bend, and I could not make myself put the line in the water, because there was no one sitting on the other rock. My grandfather said grief is the rent we pay for having been rich in people. In this decade, the rent comes due on all of it at once. How do you keep standing when the ones who knew the whole story of you begin to leave? You will not like my answer yet, so keep sitting with me. Here is the fourth confession, and it grows straight up out of the third. Your whole life, you were strong for someone. You got up in the dark and went to work because a family was counting on your back. You did not weep at the graveside because your children were watching and needed to see a mountain, not a man. Strength always had an audience, and the audience is what made it possible. But in this decade, the audience thins out. The people you performed your strength for have grown up and gone, or grown old themselves, or passed on ahead. And one gray afternoon you understand there is no longer a single soul you have to be strong for. And instead of feeling free, you feel like an actor still in costume long after everyone has left the theater. Who am I if no one needs me to be the strong one anymore? I sat in my truck in a parking lot at 72 and cried the way I had not let myself cry in 40 years, over nothing, over everything. My grandmother said we do not carry our burdens only for ourselves. We carry them so the young can watch us carry them and learn it can be done. When the young stop watching, the weight does not go away. It just becomes yours and only yours. That is the fourth stone. Here's the fifth confession. Up until this decade, you had one word that carried you through every hard day, and the word was later. You would fix it later. You would rest later. You would finally sit on the porch and do a whole lot of nothing later. Later was a country you were always just about to move to. And then, somewhere in these 10 years, you go to spend the word and find the account is nearly empty. You catch yourself doing the arithmetic nobody wants to do. How many good summers are likely left? How many more times you will really stand at the ocean? I remember the morning that word died for me. I was 74, still saving a good bottle for a special occasion I kept believing was coming, and it struck me cold that I had been saving my whole life for a someday that had quietly already gone by. My grandfather said the poorest man he ever knew was the one who died rich in tomorrows he never spent a one of. Are you saving your very best self for a day that may never come? That is the fifth stone, and unlike the others, this one has a gift hidden down inside it, if you are brave enough to dig for it. Here is the sixth confession, and it is a quiet one, so quiet that most people never say it out loud at all. For most of your life, your worth was measured in what you did, the harvest you brought in, the children you raised, the paycheck, the mended fence, the finished day. And in this decade, one thing after another gets taken out of your hands. The work, the driving at night, the tall ladder, the big garden. People take these things from you out of love, to keep you safe. But no one warns you that when you take away everything a man does, he is left alone in a room with a terrible question. Whether he is still worth anything just for being. Who are you? On a day you accomplish nothing at all. I filled that emptiness badly at first, with the television turned up loud and with resentment turned up louder. My grandmother said a tree that stops giving fruit is not worthless. The whole forest still leans on its roots and rests in its shade. But nobody had ever once asked me to be shade before. I had only ever known how to be fruit. Learning the difference between the two is the work of that entire decade. That is the sixth stone. And here is the seventh confession, the one I am least proud of, and the most important of them all, which is why I saved it for the last. In that decade you become a masterful liar, and you tell your very finest lie to the people who love you most. Someone calls, a son, a daughter, a good neighbor, and they ask how you are getting on. And you are lonely enough that particular morning to weep and frightened in a way you have no good words for, and you hear yourself say, bright and easy as anything, "Oh, I'm just fine. Everything's fine here." You do it to protect them. You do not want to be a burden. You still remember when they were small and you were the whole shelter over their heads. But every single time you say I'm fine when you are not, you build the wall around yourself one stone higher with your own two hands. You end up starving at a full table while swearing to everyone that you could not eat another bite. My grandmother said the loneliest person in any village is never the one who lives farthest out. It is the one who smiles the widest, so that nobody thinks to ask them twice. Why do we hide the one thing that, if we only said it plainly, would bring them running straight to us? That is the seventh stone, and it is the one that turns all the others from simple sorrow into true solitude. Now, I want to be careful with you here because I have handed you 7 heavy stones, and I will not leave you standing there holding them. Naming these 7 things was not the same as hating the years they came out of. It took me a long time to understand that. For a while I thought that if I admitted how hard that decade truly was, I was calling my own life a failure, or calling myself weak for having struggled through it. But that is not what naming does. Naming a thing is simply how you finally take your own hands off your own throat. And here is what I learned, sitting at that table with my seed envelope in the lamplight. Every one of those 7 stones had a door in it, and a door only ever means one thing. It means you can walk back through. The chair went empty, but I could learn to fill my own evenings instead of standing guard over an empty room. My voice became furniture, but I could carry it to where it was actually wanted, to the young ones who had no grandfather of their own. The word later ran clean out, so I stopped saving my good bottle and my good self, and I started spending both of them today. Every hard thing about that decade was also a door. I did not survive those years by growing myself a thicker skin. I survived them by walking through doors I had been too proud or too afraid to open. So let me gather this up for you now, the way my grandmother gathered the 4 ends of her shawl before she stood to leave a room. 7 stones, all from the middle of the river. They stop asking your opinion. You stay sharp enough to feel every single thing you have lost. The empty chairs become your own people. There is no one left to be strong for. The word later quietly runs out of money. The things you did get lifted out of your hands, and you learn to say, "I'm fine" to the very people who would come running if only you told them the truth. Now I am going to turn each of those around and hand it right back to you, as a question for your own life. Whose opinion have you stopped offering because no one thought to ask? What loss are you carrying wide awake this very night? And when someone who loves you asks how you are doing, do you tell them, or do you say you're fine and set the wall one more stone higher? Now hear me, whoever you are, sitting there in the quiet with this playing. I know the question underneath your ribs right now, because it was mine too. You are asking, is it too late for me? Have I built the wall too high, waited too long, gone too quiet to be reached anymore? No, it is not too late. The people who love you are not gone. Most of them are only one honest sentence away, and they are waiting. Reaching for them is not the weakness you are so afraid it is. Telling the truth about a hard year is not slamming a door on your own strength. It is finally opening one. Nothing that truly matters is lost. It is only waiting on the far side of one thing you are still too afraid to say out loud. So before you go, stay here at the table with me one last moment. Of these 7 stones, which one hit closest to home for you tonight? Tell me in the comments below. Just put down its number, and a word or two beside it if you can find them. For I read every last one, slowly, by this same lamp. And that little book I set down beside you earlier, The Native Way, is waiting for you now in the link right below this video. No pressure at all, only there if your heart ever wants it. Either way, be gentler with yourself tonight than that whole hard decade ever was. Stay a while. Sit with me again tomorrow. There is always another chair at this table for you.